Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Wild Wanderers workshop. This workshop is being presented by the Master Gardeners of Placer County. My name is Donna Olson, and I will be your moderator today. As you saw in the opening slides, this workshop is being recorded, and in a couple of days, it will be uploaded to our YouTube site. You will find a link to the video and any accompanying resources on our public website, which is pcmg.ucanr.org. If you have questions during the talk, please post them in the chat list and our presenter will answer them at the end. Today's presenter is Peggy Beltramo, who has been a Master Gardener since 2005. Peggy is a fount of gardening knowledge and she's always ready to share it. I know she has a lot of fun and useful information for us today. So Peggy, you're up.
Thank you, Donna. As she said, I've been a Master Gardener for 16 plus years. One of my interests is California natives. And as a result of that, and some mistakes I've made in plant choices, I became interested in plants that behave badly. Those are the plants that wander around your garden or put out their elbows and push their way into their neighbors' spaces. Some are just bossy and some are bad characters that invade our native spaces, altering the habitat. We'll learn some more about these plants as we go along. The photo in the opening slide is a morning glory that I planted 12 to 15 years ago. And every year I have one or two that still keep coming back up. This one even right next to the driveway. We have some slides that explain who Master Gardeners are. We extend research-based information to home gardeners so that you can make your own gardening decisions. You can find us in media and special publications. We'll talk a little more about these as we go along. Our Curious Gardener quarterly newsletter just came out. I'll show you where you can sign up for that if you're interested. With COVID-19, we have not been as available because there haven't been that many live events, but we do come to garden clubs and other civic organizations. We have workshops live and, as you see, on Zoom. Farmers markets. The garden fair is in April and we are planning one for next April, and our Mother's Day garden tour is planned for next May. Here's our website, pcmg.ucanr.org. That will be on your handout so you don't have to remember it now. The red arrow, yes.
Excuse me, we're not seeing your slides. We're just seeing you. Yeah.
I don't see me at all. Thank you. All right, I have to find my, I'm sorry. I have to share my screen, right? All right, I will go back. There's the, now do you see it?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. There's that silly morning glory that I talked about. Here's our research-based information, where to find us. You can go back and review this presentation in a couple of days, and that's where you will be able to find the handout that will give you all the information that I'm going to talk about today. Here's that website. And I put up some arrows so that you can see some important things. The red arrow is a gold banner, and every one of those words has a drop-down menu with tons of resources. So if you want to know about landscape plants, go over to the landscape plants, click on it, and you will see, I don't know, 15 or 20 different choices of articles that you can read. The blue arrows are upcoming and already recorded workshops. The Wild Wanderers, as I said, will be there in a day or two with the handout. The green arrows are the Ask a Master Gardener question link. This is specifically for Placer County homeowners who want to know about the local conditions. If you live somewhere outside of Placer County, you can go to your local county master gardener organization and find a ask a question banner there also. The yellow is the Curious Gardener newsletter that I just mentioned, and you can click on that and sign up to receive this quarterly informational newsletter. Here is our brand new gardening guide and calendar, a sneak peek. It's now in stores. Our host today and his wife were out delivering calendars to vendors. You can go on our website and find out which vendors have it, or you can order it from our website online and either pick it up or have it sent to you. The brown arrow shows where the Placer County planting guide is. If you want to know when to plant specific vegetables and when you can harvest them, you can download that, laminate it, keep it in your workshop shed area, and be ready to go. Here's a slide of what the handout looks like. It has online resources. It has our Master Gardener information at the top. Some of the things I'm talking about today, I'll refer to the fact that that information is on your handout. So we'll be able to see it. Our agenda for today, I'm going to start with it depends. I'll explain about that in a minute. Read the label, plan for trouble, contain and deadhead, divide and multiply, weeds, and most importantly, don't plant a pest. Avoid invasive plants. So it depends. That's the mantra of master gardeners. If you ask a question of a master gardener, most likely what you'll hear is, it depends. Then we'll ask you questions about how often do you water? Is it in the sun or the shade? There are a number of different factors that we need to know to be able to give you information. So you want to learn about a new plant that you're considering. What are its water needs? Can you meet those needs? What light? Does it want sun or shade? How about the soil that it's going to be planted into? If it wants an acidic soil and you live on alkaline soil, you need to take that into consideration. And the work involved. If you pick a plant that's slightly aggressive, are you willing to prune it when it needs to be pruned? Are you planting it in a place that fits the size of the plant? We'll talk some more about that. And is it an annual or a perennial? That's a consideration you need to take into effect too. Here's one plant label, and I went to look on the web and I found proven winners with so much information on their labels. Oftentimes the label will have a picture like this, the seller and the common name of the plant, and that's about the only information. It may give you the size, it may say sun or shade, but this one has particularly a lot of information. The thing I want to point out is where that botanical name is. This one is listed as Petunia hybrid, but you always want to look at the second name, particularly of a perennial, because it will tell you whether it is a 10-inch plant or a 10-foot plant. And that's definitely going to make a difference when you're choosing the plant. The reverse of this label also has lots of information. Now we're going to talk about these plants in particular through the rest of this presentation. The polite plants, the self-seeders, the thugs or aggressive plants, multipliers, weeds, and lastly, invasives. So polite plants grow where they're planted. They don't crowd out their neighbors. They don't give you surprises. If they reseed, it's gentle and it's easy to remove extras. Self-seeders, annuals that reseed. Here's a sunflower. I have them come up. I planted sunflowers in amongst my vegetables, And every year they grace my vegetable beds with new sunflowers. If they're in a place I don't want them, they're easy to pull out. Sometimes they seed into the pathways, and I generally just move around them as I'm working in the vegetable garden. Some perennials drop seeds nearby. This is a Santa Barbara daisy down at the bottom. It's a plant I love, and it gently reseeds in my garden, but it is on the watch list for invasive plants, because in some areas, I guess maybe over on the coast where they get more fog, it might be more aggressive there. So you have to watch again. Now raise your right hand and repeat after me. If I see a plant that I'm curious about, I will ask these questions. Is this plant a vigorous spreader or aggressive? If so, is it easy to weed out? Does this plant spread by underground runners? Is this plant invasive? Then just tell yourself no. Check it out. I'll show you where you can find out the plants that you should not plant and a safer choice at that Plant Right website. Aggressive plants spread faster than you want them to. They move into unwanted spaces, but they may be aggressive only in one area, for instance, in the sun, not in the shade. So you can learn how to contain their enthusiasm and still choose these plants, or be willing to do the work to keep them under control. Size does matter. This is Asters, Bill's Big Blue. It's a gorgeous plant. I love it. I have it in my yard, and I'm not entirely happy with it, I have to admit. It says this is from the Honeybee Haven, which is at UC Davis, and this is what they quoted. This selection can reach 5 to 6 feet in height and width. Mine is more likely 12 to 15 feet in width because it does send out runners. But Honeybee Haven says, we divide Bill yearly. So they're willing to do the work because it is such a great pollinator plant. Another nursery that I checked says, can be invasive. So check, do your homework, and decide if you're willing to do the work. Some ways you can contain naughty plants. Hardscape barriers. If you plant it next to a pathway, a cement pathway, or next to a wall that will limit where it goes, you can say, all right, I can deal with that. Plastic edging. I show you a little picture here of an edging that you can put down into the ground. This one is, I think it has a line on it that you plant that much down in the ground and the other part is supposed to stick up, but you do it the opposite. Plant it with just an inch out of the ground and the rest of it going down under if it is a shallow rooted plant that will run. You can use a bucket like I show there by taking the bottom off if you want to have it drain, but that will give you a much deeper barrier to restrain your plant, or plant it in a pot. The calla lilies there, I've had some bad luck with them. We'll look at that a little more later. And a word about bamboo. I want to say this to you from our bamboo expert, master gardener. The standard for bamboo, if you're going to plant bamboo, and the suggestion is that you not, because all your neighbors will hate you if you do. But the standard, if you're going to insist, is 30 to 36 inch deep plastic, at least 60 to 80 mils in thickness, leaving some above ground to prevent rhizomes from going over the top. She says, I used to recommend 36 inches with 6 inches of the 35 above ground. A large running bamboo can send runners, rhizomes, up to 20 feet away in one season. So if someone is battling bamboo from a neighbor's property, good luck. And clumping bamboos do not send out crazy runners, but they do need to be placed carefully because the root rhizome mass is quite large, just like any other big plant. And on your handout is an article that Lori wrote about bamboo, if that's something that's of a problem for you. And the planting in pots, one more warning. When I planted my herb garden in my other house, I put in mint and I knew it was a rowdy individual. So I put it in a pot. But I put the pot on the soil and unbeknownst to me, I never let anything hang over the side of the pot, but it went down through the hole and invaded the whole herb garden. It was all mint and nothing else. Lesson learned. I now plant it in a pot on top of a concrete paver. So there's no chance for it to escape because I do still like having mint. And here's another lesson learned. Nice until it's not. This darling flower entranced me. I bought it at the nursery and brought it home without doing my research. Aristea eklonii. Australia has a horrible invasion of this plant in their climate, which is similar to ours. I'll show you what it did in my yard. The left is what that plant now looks like. On the top of the wall is where the original was. Down at the bottom is where it has seeded itself. Can I restrain that one? Or had I restrained it, would I have been okay? No. If you look on the right, those are all little baby Aristeas growing in the pathway. And each one of those will become one of those big clumps. So this one, if I had deadheaded and if I were willing to religiously deadhead it every time it was blooming, I would be okay. I'm not. Anybody wants to bring their shovel, they can come help me weed. So know your relatives. I mentioned the mint family. They have square stems, they're Lamiaceae, but some of them are economically important. Mint, basil, oregano, rosemary, all of those herbs are important garden and offerings. There are ornamentals. I have here well garden list. That's water efficient landscaping. The Fair Oaks Horticulture Center, which is the demo garden for the Sacramento Master Gardeners. They have a list. It will be on the handout. That's a great place to go if you want to see the plants actually in the ground. And they are all, I believe, polite plants. Some weeds are also in this family, lamium or dead nettle and prunella, the self-heal. If you have those growing in your yard, they're complements of the mint family. So know your relatives. This is a plant that used to be called Perovskia atroplicifolia, Russian sage. It has now been renamed and moved into the salvia family. So now you think about, I wonder if it has any aggressive properties. Well, yes, it does. It's on the watch list. And here is an area along Auburn Folsom Road in Placer County that I discovered. The original planting is where that yellow arrow is, way back there. That's about 1/4 mile away. And all the purple ones are 5 different plants of the Russian sage that have seeded themselves out into the wild land. And if I turned around from where this picture was taken, you will see one more and maybe more than that on down the road, going away from where that original planting was. So besides planning for trouble, divide and multiply. These are the plants that you really don't have a problem with. Irises, other rhizomes, bulbs, corms, and perennials. You can dig up and divide daylilies as they complete their bloom. This daylily garden was the gift of another master gardener. She divided hers and gave them all to me, and they're now quite happy and will be ready to divide and share in another year or so. So they're not going to cause me problems. They're just going to politely get a little bigger and a little bigger. Aggressive thugs, rhizomes, which are swollen underground stems, and stolons above ground runners. If the nursery says they're vigorous, beware. If your neighbor has some to share with you every year, that might be a signal that, I don't know if I'm going to do some research before I say yes, but I'll consider it. Now, before I turn to the next slide, think back to those calla lilies. They happen to be the colored ones. They were sort of a dark pink color. But here's what happens if calla lilies are planted directly in the ground. This is Calla Lily Valley near Big Sur, and our calla down to the surf. And it is a destination. You can go there and visit, but think about if you want your yard to look like this. Now, weeds are plants that are out of place, where they're not wanted, or as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. Well, that could be true, but we usually go, oh, there they are again. They can be spread by wind, by birds, either dropping them from their beaks or from their behinds, and plants that are seeds that go through the digestive tract are scarified and ready to plant right then and there. Some are carried by water, and I did read that you often find weeds right next to the driveway or right next to the sidewalk because they blew in onto the concrete and then get washed into the crack, and that's where they come up. Plants that are competitive, persistent, pernicious, and interfere negatively with human activity. If you think about weeds in agricultural areas, they're a big problem. Here are a few from my yard. Field bindweed, which you see looks like a morning glory. It's in the same family. Star thistle, which is, in our wildlands, we have 25 acres. Parts of it are very heavily infested with star thistle, and it's very difficult to eradicate. Himalayan blackberries are another problem. And again, birds and other animals will eat the berries and then not happily plant them for you somewhere else. So there are garden escapees. There's naturalized versus invasive. Naturalized are naturally producing and non-native plants, but they don't dominate areas that are have native vegetation. They stay within your cultivated areas and don't roam outside your fence. Now we're going to talk about invasive plants. An invasive plant, according to the Plant Right organization, is a plant that is not native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. If you think back to those calla lilies, that was an invasion. It has taken over the native area and supplanted all of the native plants. And what surprised me when I first learned about this is it can actually change the soil chemical composition to make the soil less hospitable to the native plants. Invasive plants are more responsive to climate change, and they invade the natural areas and actually, as I said, alter the growing conditions. Here's pampas grass, a beautiful plant, but again, it will take over. This is, again, Big Sur, coincidentally, but you can see the whole coastal hillside completely overgrown with pampas grass. Invasive plants, 37% were accidentally introduced. by contamination of clothing, feedstuff, things that are brought in from other countries. The other 63% were intentionally introduced. Those explorers, if you think back to the 1800s when people are traveling around in ships and brought back plants from other places, exotic, everybody who had money wanted one of those. And some of them happily were introduced, others were not so happily introduced. 80% of the intentionally introduced came through the nursery industry as ornamental landscape species. And 29 are listed on the California Department of Food and Agriculture noxious weed list. There's a picture here of Mexican feathergrass. I'll bet you can't drive into 3 or 4 different shopping areas without seeing a planting of Mexican feathergrass. It's a beautiful, it waves softly in the wind, but all of those little fluffy tops are seeds, just being be wind-borne and spread. Here's the Plant Right organization. This is on the handout. Their job is to identify, locate, educate, and collaborate. Since 2011, UC Master Gardeners volunteers conducted surveys of the retail availability of a selection of landscape ornamentals that are also described as invasive species. The intent as shown is to educate retailers, identify invasives that are for sale, and collaborate with retailers to stop selling invasives and offer alternatives. From the original invasive plant list, 19 species that were identified, only 7 are still commonly available. Here is a patch of Scotch broom, and broom plants are no longer available in any nurseries in California, I believe. You can see that's a terrible invasion. Here's the blank, this came out 2 days ago in my inbox. I did participate this year with the Plant Right survey. And I surveyed a nursery that was no longer in active because of COVID-19. It was a very small nursery. I had a nice conversation with the owner who wasn't aware of Plant Right's mission. So I did talk to her about it. The original plants down at the bottom shows in the green line that the original 4 plants are down to only 6% of nurseries having them available. The new plants that were added in 2014 are still dropping, especially that Mexican feathergrass that was in the last slide. And big box stores are actually down to 0% invasive plants that have been identified by the Plant Right survey, which is really a good outcome. But they have partnered with Plant Right to stop selling, and occasionally has informational activities for nurseries to learn more about the problem with invasive plants. So recapping, we looked at, it depends, know your area, know what the plant needs, and that it will be happy and not too happy where you're planning to put it. Read the label and plan for trouble. Contain or deadhead as needed. Divide and multiply as they get bigger. And good luck with your weeds, and avoid invasive plants. Let's not make it worse. Here's kudzu, which is fortunately not in California. And you can see there's a house, and I'm sure abandoned, that has been completely inundated with kudzu. So thank goodness we don't have to contend with that. That's it. I'll take any questions that have come up. Donna?
Okay. I see in the chat list, we have a question from Pat, and Pat is wondering, and I think it was that photo you showed where you were showing where you had replanted some irises or something near your fence. And her question is, what is that tall cone-shaped plant that's next to the fence?
Good question.
I think it was slide number 13, maybe. I looked at it at the time.
Let me go back. Thank you. My slides, David has taken over the
Oh, oops.
slide share. That's okay. That's okay.
And Brooke says
I
maybe
unshared, Peggy, so you can go back if you'd like.
Oh. Brooke says maybe, is it pronounced Echium, E-C-H-I-U-M?
Oh, yes. If it was next to the yellow house, it is an Echium. It's called Echium wildprettii. It is a, oh, I can't think of the common name right now.
Yeah. And then here's a question from Kelly. She wants to know, is butterfly bush invasive?
It is on the watch list, Kelly. It has not been declared an invasive plant, but it is a problem in some areas. I don't see that photo right now. There it is, this one. Let me. That's the one, divide and multiply, that tall one.
Oh, Brooke says it's called Pride of Madeira.
No, this is a taller one. Pride of Madeira is a cousin. This is Tower of Jewels. It's a fantastic plant.
Yeah, was that the one you showed us one time on one of our meetings that was really big?
I don't recall.
Oh.
It has bright pink and purple flowers all over. These are through blooming. It's a biennial. It makes a small rosette the first year and these tall stalks the second year.
Yeah, I think that you brought us a picture one time to one of our meetings of yours.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, Kelly asks again, so do you recommend not planting butterfly bush?
I don't have that recommendation because I don't know the what the final outcome is on it. I do have butterfly bush. And again, Kelly, I think that depends because I think water, light, maybe the variety can all have an impact on it. What I would do is look up butterfly bush invasive UCANR and see if you can find any information from the UC Master Gardener education area about what they recommend. I don't know the current recommendations.
Okay, well, that seems to be all the questions that we have today. So I would like to thank you, Peggy, for sharing all this good information with us. And I'm pretty sure that most of us have probably experienced one or more of these plants in our garden. I'd also like to remind everybody that in the next couple of days, you'll find a link to the handouts and to this recorded workshop at pcmg.ucanr.org under virtual gardening workshops. You can also check our listing there for future virtual workshops